Short story writer Cynthia Ozick said, "Two things remain irretrievable. Time and a first impression, and no truer words have been spoken." Well, Hitman Reborn had a very terrible first impression and is one of my favorites, but that's beside the point. It takes a lot to pick out a show to watch nowadays with the sheer amount that get released, so if it doesn't hook you early on, it feels like a complete waste of time. When you think about it, there are different factors that hook you into wanting to see more. One of the most memorable parts of Mushoku Tensei, for example, for me, was when Rudeus fired off that water magic in the first episode. Not because it was a strong attack, but because seeing how much effort was put into just that magic shot meant that good animation was going to be the least of our worries when it came to this show, and you subconsciously ask yourself why this particular isekai had scenes with this much detail. Gone are the days where you had to wait to the end of the first season to know if the anime is going to be worth your time. During the days of the big three, I personally kept watching most of those long running shows because I wanted to see the stuff that was teased in the OPs, and sometimes they just straight up lied and it felt like your whole life was a lie. But nowadays, probably because of the reducing attention span of humanity, shows make sure to give you a good impression in the first episode, or in worst case, the first three. Past that and there'll be no reason to continue. With that, I want to talk about two shows this season, or last season, that completely nailed the mark with their first episodes. They introduced us to the characters, world, plot, future plot points, and managed to create intrigue all while delivering stunning animation in the process. What's great about those two shows I want to discuss is that they both did it in different ways. Mind you, I'm not comparing them shot for shot or bar for bar. While Heavenly Delusion's first episode was full of setup for questions and possible plot points, Oshinoko's first episode was a true setup that served to completely mislead the audience, but it's only through an analysis of the first episode that the payoff at the end truly makes sense. So for Oshinoko, I will tackle the first episode in a different way from Heavenly Delusion. Oshinoko is a story that was written by the genius behind Kaguya-sama Aka Akasaka Akasaka, and knowing who the writer is sets up the story for success, but it could also lead people to have expectations as to what the story is about when they start watching a 1.5 hour episode, but I've never been mixed up this heavily by a show's premise before, and at the end of the full runtime, I appreciated every single bit of setup that was given to it. Hearing that an idol anime had a movie-length first episode, and that after said episode surpassed FMA on my anime list tells you everything you need to know. I thought it was overhyped, I thought no way it deserved such a long setup, but as I kept watching, I felt it was building up to something. I was laughing, I was jamming to the music, I was creeped out, then I got scared, and finally I got emotional. This is how you start a show that destroys everyone's preconceived notions of what it's going to be about. It started off on the comedic side to get us to really know the personality of the main characters, and both of them started talking about their different thoughts on being reborn. And just from that early scene, it starts to make you think about the circumstances that people are born in. The doctor who lives a pretty chill life in the countryside doesn't really see the value in being reborn and sees it as nonsense. Maybe because he's a scientist and there's no data backing up such claims, he can't really see it as anything more than a farce. Or maybe it's because he has no need for a new life while being perfectly content with his current one. But on the other hand, we have the brain tumor patient who is in love with idols and the idea of being a performer while she's plagued with mobility issues. So with her condition, she dreams of having a life made for her, one where you look like a celebrity and knew the right people. Basically to have the life everyone dreams of while you have the one that people pray against.
もし芸能人の子供に生まれていたらって考えたことはない？容姿やコネクションを生まれた時から持ち合わせていたらって。
But with this, the story just starts to sow seeds of rebirth in your mind slowly, and at this point, it wasn't very subtle anymore because a random guy in the hospital says if he dies at that moment, he can be reborn as an idol child. Not only does that hammer in the rebirth point, but it starts to slowly sow more seeds, but this time, of death. And as was already set up, the doctor died at the time of birth and he ended up being reborn. I guess his rebirth wasn't as much of a surprise as the tumor patient one was. The episode from here onwards was probably the reason it was made into a movie length. They had to go to great lengths to show us how Ai's life was going to be with her new family. And they did a great job of showing us how successful she was becoming. I was rooting for her and I'm sure you were as well, because what she did was damn near impossible, even for people without kids, much less a single mother of twins in her teens. The events that this first episode sets up can be seen as what happens when the two people who are involved in making a baby do not agree on what should happen. And this kind of conversation is very difficult to have with people, much less with one guy talking in a YouTube video, but what I would say is that it was handled tastefully here, and the way I wholeheartedly wanted to be better for her kids was heartwarming. It could honestly be an inspiration to someone out there who may be going through the same thing as her. But there was always the fear of when we were going to see that stalker who killed the doctor again. Will he get caught? Did he already die? When will he show up again? But in between those questions, the kids were showing signs of what they wanted to be in future, the prospects they had received from their great genes. This was great because this was the truest part of the episode, the parts involving the kids. Aqua was a former doctor turned idol fan who felt like he had to do all he could to protect his patient because of what she was going through and what she was seemingly giving up to have her kids. Ruby was a former brain tumor victim who had tried all she could to just walk on some days but couldn't do it and wanted to be able to dance or perform, and both of them died, and Be Reborn gave them the chance to be able to fulfill the dreams they had prior to their death. So even though the story became sort of a mystery to find Ai's killer, the story always focused on the kids, but it was still a shock to see how the events played out because Aka Akasaka made us fully invested in the family, he made us fully invested in the company and everyone involved. Oshinoko could have definitely done all this in about 3 to 4 episodes, but then it wouldn't have had the impact that it did by keeping us hooked and following the characters for over an hour, only to end in a tragedy. Tengoku Daimakyo on the other hand made me actively stop myself from watching the second episode because I wanted to make a lot of predictions and see if I could accurately get some right when I caught up. The feeling I got from this episode was akin to what the first episode of The Promised Neverland gave me, but it did it in a different way. It sets up mysteries of both the outside world and inside by giving us multiple perspectives. We get to see different people living in a facility that has all the amenities they could want, but the thought of not being restricted behind walls or a dome intrigues them. Then you have others who are seeking heaven or what people around them may consider to be heaven because the way life currently is could only feel like hell. We get introduced to the two main characters on the outside and just random bits of possibly important characters on the inside. For example, the guy with crazy reflexes, the girl who has visions, the boy who looks like Mario on the outside, the artist who drew a fish with arms so it could eat other fish, and the girl who seemed eager to show something to the professor. It didn't hammer in the importance of everyone, but you get the feeling they might either be important in saving humanity, or they'll be fodder for another character's development by getting eaten. In just 25 minutes, you would ask yourself, what are these monsters exactly? Where did they come from? How was life before their destruction? Who is Mario exactly and why did he need a bodyguard? Why does he move the way he does and why does he have a twin on the inside? Why can the girl essentially see the future? Is the story going to have humans with supernatural powers, and what happens to all their families? Are tomatoes special in this world? That first shot of the entire show was of a tomato. And I'm wondering if this facility is the heaven those thugs mentioned, and if it is, it means someone has been able to escape before. Of course, these are not all the questions it poses, but you get the point. It didn't just throw things out at us randomly, we kind of just naturally want to know these things because of one important thing: captivating characters. Nothing hurts a story more than the main characters you hate. Luckily, I liked these guys enough to care when they got seemingly drugged by the end. And after seeing how Oshinoko's first episode ended, you can see why I was worried. Another main draw for Tengoku Daimakyo was the animation and direction. This anime had some shots that had no reason being that good. I recently, a few months ago, started looking into cinematography and how to make or get the perfect shot, and there are some in here that are definitely done by someone who loves film. And now that one short fight fits in the same vein as the Mushoku Tensei water shot moment I mentioned in the beginning because it shows you what they can do. In like the first 30 seconds, we see some kids playing around and we get this kind of drone type shot that starts low on the ground and pans upwards to a girl that seems to just be observing the people below her, and at that moment someone calls her Mimihime, which, if you know anything, Hime means princess. So that little detail of the girl with princess in her name looking over her quote subjects is pretty nice. That's how we essentially get introduced to the facility. For the characters on the outside, we get the shot of the pavement that mirrors any rundown neighborhood, and two people with shoes that don't match their situation walk past the camera. Then we get a similar but different pan that goes towards us, the viewer, to a higher plane that has no one watching from above, probably to symbolize the lack of order in this world. That entire sequence towards the end of the episode with the old woman and her gun leading to the monster landing on the window was kinda crazy. Now disclaimer, I'm probably looking too much into all these things, but that's always fun to do in the first episode. And obviously that little fight was pretty cool. They had a good mix of close-up shots, low angles, mediums, and over-the-shoulder ones too, but the way all these types of shots were changed and mixed together helps to depict the flow of the battle better. And the one POV shot on this fight is when the old dude was getting kicked in the face, and it made me jerk my head back a bit. It was perfect. The first anime that introduced me to 3D movement and tracking in that way was Attack on Titan Junior High, and now I'm always actively looking forward to it. So obviously when the first fight happened, I had to know who was behind this, and production IG needs no introduction, and after finding out who the studio was, I needed to know who was behind the direction, because just good animation wasn't gonna cut it. The episode director was Hirotaka Mori, and apart from directing the first episode of Haikyuu, he worked on some stuff with Fate Apocrypha, which in some ways felt similar to this first episode. Not only did they get a good studio and an amazing director, they managed to get a music composer who worked on Chainsaw Man, Space Dandy, and Silent Voice. What's even more shocking is the source material for this anime has only 55 chapters, so they really bet all their marbles on the show. But if the rest of the show is anything like this introduction we got to it, then I'm glad to say that they have not wasted any bit of money that they spent making it. These two animes set the entire tone for the spring 2023 season, and I love that they held on to it. It didn't sort of fall off by the end. Like I said earlier, the first impression of any show or any person or thing in general is really important. And this show, these two shows made the biggest first impressions. I'm gonna watch them and finish them, but I'm glad I finally got my thoughts off of how the first episodes made me feel. What did you guys think of how the shows are currently, or like how they end and how they started? And which other shows do you think have the best first episodes? Let me know. That's it for me today, and I'll see you all soon. Peace.